summaries, today I'll be doing episode 467, Pace, the Final Frontier. The episode begins right in the middle of Ash's rematch with Brandon at the Battle Pyramid. Ash had just recalled his Charizard and sent out his Bulbasaur, but not before thanking Charizard for giving it its absolute all, even if it did lose. We then see that Nurse Joy, Chansey, Officer Jenny, Oak, Scott, May, Max, and Brock were all still watching the battle, and May commented that Bulbasaur looked very happy to be battling, and Scott admitted that he was curious to see as to how Ash would try and turn the match around in his favor. Meanwhile, we then cut to outside the Battle Pyramid, where Team Rocket were climbing up the Battle Pyramid walls so that they could sneak in and try and steal some Pokémon, even potentially catching everyone off guard. Meowth was complaining about his aching kneecaps while climbing, but Jessie rebutted that Meowth was the one who came up with the stupid idea to climb up. Although James and Meowth reminded Jessie that it was actually Jessie's idea to climb up the Battle Pyramid, so she had no right to complain. Anyways, it was now time for the next round to begin in Brandon and Ash's battle, Dusclops versus Bulbasaur, and Dusclops made the first move, hitting Bulbasaur with a Shadow Punch. Bulbasaur is blown back a little bit, but Ash tells Bulbasaur to withstand the attack as best it can, and it obliges, and then, per Ash's orders, it retaliates with Razor Leaf, sending Dusclops back a bit as well. Although immediately after this, Brandon has Dusclops use a Mean Look, leaving Ash to panic, because he now knew what Mean Look did after what happened to Charizard, and Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny panic as well, as they confirmed what Mean Look did. It prevented Bulbasaur from leaving the battle. Although Ash tried to encourage Bulbasaur, saying that it wouldn't matter if it was stuck in the battle, if they could just beat Dusclops, and he told Bulbasaur to use a Vine Whip, but Brandon had Dusclops dodge before having Dusclops use another Shadow Punch on Bulbasaur, which in turn sends Bulbasaur flying back against the Battle Pyramid wall, screaming in pain. Ash comes up with an idea though, as he tells Bulbasaur to use Leech Seed, which sprouts vines that wrap around Dusclops and sap its energy, with Max elaborating on how Leech Seed worked, mentioning that it would keep draining energy from Dusclops for the remainder of the battle. Brandon heard Max and claimed that it didn't matter if they won quickly, because if they beat Bulbasaur, then the Leech Seed effect should wear off. So Brandon just had Dusclops attack with a Will-O-Wisp, leaving Bulbasaur to counter with Razor Leaf, and both attacks collide in midair and explode, surprising both Bulbasaur and Dustox. Nurse Joy then comments on how evenly matched Bulbasaur and Dusclops appeared to be, while Dusclops takes some more damage from Leech Seed. Ash then suggests that Bulbasaur start charging up a Solar Beam. Brandon appreciated this, because this allowed him to attack Bulbasaur with a Confuse Ray while Bulbasaur was charging up. Brock was about to suggest that Ash recall Bulbasaur for the time being to avoid the confusion, but he remembered that Bulbasaur was under Mean Look. Bulbasaur became confused and started to wobble because of its confusion, as Team Rocket had finally climbed to the open pyramid roof and stopped for a rest, about to go in. But right before they could go in, they were blasted off, because Bulbasaur had used Solar Beam while confused, and this resulted in the Solar Beam being fired towards the roof as opposed to Dusclops, so Team Rocket was affected by this. With Bulbasaur still confused, and Ash panicking a little bit because of this, Brandon takes his chance to have Dusclops use a Will-O-Wisp while still getting drained by Leech Seed at the same time. Regardless, the Will-O-Wisp hits, and Professor Oak commented how the Will-O-Wisp would do extra damage, since Bulbasaur was weak to Fire-type moves, and Will-O-Wisp was a Fire-type move. Ash knew that launching an attack was risky, because Bulbasaur was almost falling over due to how confused it was, but he had no choice but to have Bulbasaur to use a Vine Whip. But Bulbasaur was so confused, it ended up attacking itself, as opposed to Dusclops. Brandon then has Dusclops use another Will-O-Wisp, and this attack sends Bulbasaur flying, leaving Officer Jenny in awe of the sheer power of the attack. Along with Nurse Joy, the two of them had been particularly worried about Bulbasaur, and now they were really worried about it, because it just wouldn't get back up off the ground. Bulbasaur was on track to slam into the wall, but Ash jumped between Bulbasaur and the wall and caught Bulbasaur, although he just fell against the wall in the process, and Bulbasaur did too, but Bulbasaur was softened by him. Bulbasaur, confused, must have thought that Ash was a threat, so it attacked Ash and itself with a Vine Whip, worrying and confusing everyone watching in the stands, as Ash grunted in pain. Although Ash tried to remember how Bulbasaur always fought stronger Pokemon in order to help its friends. It would always help people. It would never harm anyone, unless, of course, it was in a friendly way. But it harming itself when Ash with Vine Whip certainly wasn't friendly. So he cried out for Bulbasaur to stop what he was doing, trying to break it out of its confusion. And this worked, as both Ash and Bulbasaur recall Bulbasaur taking out many opponents, such as Jesse's Arbok at one time, and Vincent's Meganium, and there was also an Exeggutor and Zangoose that had battled before in its past, among many other battles. With Bulbasaur no longer confused, Professor Oak remarked that Ash had just done the impossible. He had gotten a Pokemon out of its confused state, out of its bond with it. Ash then had Bulbasaur charge up another Solar Beam. However, before the Solar Beam could launch, Dusclops continued to get leeched by the Leech Seed. This wasn't enough to take out Dusclops, though, allowing it to use a Will-O-Wisp while Bulbasaur was charging up its Solar Beam. Although Ash somehow was able to have Bulbasaur dodge and then fire the Solar Beam, and this allowed the Solar Beam to hit Dusclops and knock it out. Ash celebrates the fact that Bulbasaur was able to break out of its confusion and congratulates it, while Max comments that it must not have just been the Solar Beam that took out Dusclops, but Dusclops must have been severely weakened by the Leech Seed as well. Brandon was surprised that he had actually lost one of his Pokemon for once during a battle with Ash, but nonetheless, he returned it and sent out his second Pokemon, a Ninjask. Seeing this, Ash decided to recall Bulbasaur to let it rest after the tough battle with Dusclops, so he could send it out later, and for now, chose to send out Squirtle instead. Samuel then officially declares that it was time for the battle to begin, while May scans Ninjask with a Pokedex to find out more about it. The battle begins with Brandon telling his Ninjask to use Aerial Ace, but Ash tells his Squirtle to use Rapid Spin, which essentially renders the Aerial Ace useless against the Rapid Spin, as the Rapid Spin essentially deflects the Aerial Ace, leaving Scott especially impressed by the Rapid Spin. However, Brandon simply tells Ninjask to use a Sandstorm instead, which sends Squirtle flying, until it lands on its back with the Sandstorm still engulfing it. Immediately following this, as Ash encourages Squirtle to try and get back up before it can, Brandon has Ninjask use a double team. So, all these duplicates surround Squirtle, although Squirtle quickly gets back up as fast as it can and uses Water Gun to destroy all of the double team copies, exposing the real one, allowing Squirtle to focus a super powered Water Gun on only it, but Ninjask was able to dodge and use Aerial Ace on Squirtle, hitting Squirtle hard, although Ash begged for Squirtle to hang in there as it crashed into the ground. Eventually, Squirtle was able to get back up and use a Hydro Pump, so Ninjask countered by using a Sandstorm attack to protect itself. However, as Oak commented how perfectly matched the two moves were, the Sandstorm pushed the Hydro Pump back, defeating it. Brandon then had Ninjask follow up with a Sand attack, blinding Squirtle, with Scott admitting that using a minor move like Sand attack after a major one was a typical Brandon strategy. And Scott really admired Brandon's strategies as Squirtle closed its eyes in pain from the blindness. Ninjask then goes in for another Aerial Ace, which causes everyone to panic as they point out that Squirtle won't be able to see the Aerial Ace coming since it was blinded, so it won't be able to dodge. And Scott was immensely impressed by another one of Brandon's strategies. Squirtle, however, was able to listen for Ninjask per Ash's suggestion, much to everyone's amazement, as it was able to hear the Aerial Ace coming its way after some focusing, and was able to dodge it, and immediately followed up with a Hydro Pump, which of course required it to withdraw into its shell, although unfortunately the Hydro Pump missed because it essentially went too high, because Ninjask moved out of the way, and then used another Aerial Ace on Squirtle. Just because the Hydro Pump didn't hit Ninjask though, didn't mean it was entirely useless, because it soon came down and hit Squirtle, which cleared its eyes, allowing it to see fully, surprising Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny, as Squirtle was able to come out of its shell and counter with a Skull Bash, slamming into Ninjask and knocking it into the Battle Pyramid wall and knocking it out. So the referee Samuel officially declares Ninjask unable to battle, so Ash picks up Squirtle and the two of them celebrate. In the audience, Nurse Joy states that Brandon only had 2 Pokemon left, and Brock says that Ash still had 3. So, Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny celebrate at the fact that Ash had actually taken the lead for once, as Brandon recalls his Ninjask, leaving the audience amazed that Ash was actually doing well, as Brandon calls out his 3rd Pokemon, Solrock, and May scans it with a Pokedex. And Brock and Max eagerly look at it, because even they wanted to learn more about Solrock. The referee then officially declares that it was time for the next match to begin. After Brandon and Ash stared at each other for a little bit, Solrock versus Squirtle, with Squirtle starting off with a Hydro Pump, although Brandon told Solrock to block the Hydro Pump with a Psy-Wave attack. So, essentially, the Hydro Pump was blown back. Squirtle had a different plan, though, as Ash simply told it to change tactics and attack with a Skull Bash, but Brandon had a plan to deal with the Skull Bash too, telling Solrock to stop the attack with a Confusion, which halts Squirtle in midair, and then Solrock sends it crashing into the wall, releasing it from the confusion. Ash panicked, seeing that Squirtle was down, and he panicked even more when Solrock went for a Shadow Ball, but suddenly Ash had an idea, as he had Squirtle withdraw into its shell and use Hydro Pump on the wall, which essentially managed to bring itself against the wall because of the Hydro Pump, and it basically bounced off the wall to avoid the Shadow Ball. Next, Squirtle tries to end the battle by using a Rapid Spin, although Solrock quickly dodges, forcing Squirtle to crash into the opposite wall. While Squirtle was distracted by this, Solrock started to charge up a Solar Beam, leading Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny to get worried, stating that the Grass attack would be super effective against Squirtle. Ash knew this, so he tried to have Squirtle to dodge, but he gritted his teeth in frustration as he realized it was too late and the Solar Beam hit, knocking Squirtle out. While everyone who was watching the battle was shocked by Solrock's power, Ash recalled Squirtle and debated who he should send out next. Meanwhile, we then cut to Team Rocket, who refused to give up with getting into the gym, and decided to now try and dig their way into the Battle Pyramid. They were really digging a tunnel underground to come in from underneath. James and the elf were enjoying the fact that they were back to doing what they do best, digging, but Jessie was not happy about it whatsoever. She hated digging. We then go back inside the pyramid, where Ash chose to send out his Bulbasaur next. Although Max comments that sending out Bulbasaur may not have been the most ideal choice, since Bulbasaur is likely still weakened from its battle with Dusclops. Regardless, Samuel started the next battle, Solrock versus Bulbasaur, and Solrock started off by using his Psy-Wave. Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny were scared that the Psy-Wave would absolutely fuck up Bulbasaur, but thankfully Bulbasaur was able to dodge and then used a Razor Leaf, although Brandon told Solrock to stop the leaves in midair with Confusion, and it does so, and also uses the Confusion to send the leaves right back at Bulbasaur. Then Solrock follows up with using another Confusion again after Bulbasaur had already been hit by the Razor Leaves, which sends Bulbasaur flying into a wall. Bulbasaur was going to use a Vine Whip before it was thrown into the wall, but that shit was entirely negated now. However, Bulbasaur at least wasn't damaged when it hit the wall, because it was able to bounce off the wall, making Brock, Nurse Joy, and Officer Jenny impressed, as they remarked that Bulbasaur took no damage as a result. Brandon was kind of pissed, as he told Solrock to use a Shadow Ball next, although Ash told Bulbasaur to dodge and then use a Leech Seed. Bulbasaur does, in fact, dodge, and the Leech Seed begins to sap away Solrock's energy, impressing everyone in the audience. Brandon then tells Solrock to launch another Psy-Wave. This does hit Bulbasaur, but Bulbasaur gets over it pretty fast and starts to charge up a Solar Beam. So Brandon tells Solrock to match that and use a Solar Beam of its own while it was still having its energy sucked away by a Leaf Seed. Eventually, both Solar Beams launched, so they collided, causing a massive explosion and sending both Solrock and Bulbasaur into the wall, and as a result, this caused a double knockout. Both Bulbasaur and Solrock were defeated. Everyone in the crowd commented that both Ash and Brandon were down to their final Pokemon. And everyone in the crowd placed their bets on which Pokemon Ash was going to choose, with most of them settling on Pikachu, which was, of course, who Ash was going to choose, after all, because, you know, Ash said he would use the 4 Pokemon that he first owned, that he still had access to, although it was a complete wildcard as to who Brandon was going to use. Unbeknownst to everyone in the crowd, he was going to use the Pokemon that he just caught in the unsealed chamber. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, After digging their tunnel, they had finally arrived inside the battle pyramid, and they emerged from their tunnel. Although Jesse questioned why it was so dark, it was literally pitch black, and they couldn't see anything. There was supposed to be a battle going on between Ash and Brandon. Why was it so dark? Well, it turns out that they weren't exactly in the main part of the battle pyramid. They were instead in the chamber where Brandon kept his rare Reggie Pokemon, Regirock and Registeel, because he didn't currently have them on him since he wasn't using them for his battle with Ash. So, this was revealed to Jesse, James, and Meowth when the lights suddenly turned on, and they spotted Regirock and Registeel running towards them, and Team Rocket instantly cowered in fear. Both Regirock and Registeel then used the lock-on to Team Rocket to ensure that their upcoming attack, Hyper Beam, would not miss. Team Rocket tried their best to run back into their tunnel and come out through the other end, trying to escape, but Regirock and Registeel, using Hyper Beam, follows Team Rocket into the tunnel, creating a huge explosion, which destroys their tunnel and sends Team Rocket blasting off. Anyways, back into the main area of the battle pyramid, Ash and Brandon recalled their Bulbasaur and Solrock respectively, thanking them for their efforts in battle. It was then time for each of them to send out their final Pokemon, with Ash calling out Pikachu, with May commenting that there were definitely no surprises with Ash's choice. Brandon then sends out his final Pokemon, his Regice, leading Scott to state that Regice must have been the Pokemon that Brandon was searching for in the ruins that he got from the unsealed chamber. May was very intrigued by Regice, having never seen it before, obviously, because it was a legendary mythical Pokemon, whatever, and she scanned it with a Pokedex, while everyone else crowded around to learn more about it. The battle then officially began once Samuel officially declared the final battle to begin, Regice versus Pikachu. Ash told Pikachu to try and win the battle as fast as possible, telling him to attack with Thunderbolt, which hits Regice, but Max was the first one to point out, followed by everyone else, that the Thunderbolt didn't seem to do any damage whatsoever. Regice then uses a Blizzard attack, which affects even all the humans, not just Pikachu, who was enduring it as best as it could. All the humans were fucking freezing due to how cold the blizzard was, even Ash. Not just that, but the battlefield was getting colder too. Ash then had Pikachu use Iron Tail, while Professor Oak commented that Iron Tail should do extra damage against Regice. It was a good call, because Regice was an Ice-type Pokemon, which was weak to Steel-type attacks. Although Brandon then had Regice use Ice Beam to stop Pikachu in its tracks before the Iron Tail could reach Regice, because essentially the Ice Beam froze one half of the field, preventing Pikachu from running over to Regice. May tried to stay positive though, and remarked that even though half the battlefield was frozen, Pikachu at least wasn't actually hit by the attack, because he was able to move out of the way before the Ice Beam hit it. Pikachu then used a quick attack, heading towards Regice extremely fast, although Brandon countered by having Regice use another Ice Beam. This Ice Beam stopped the quick attack, since the Ice Beam ended up freezing the other half of the battlefield, preventing Pikachu from maneuvering well on it, because Pikachu would just end up slipping. So now, the entire battlefield was frozen with ice, leading Officer Jenny to comment that Regice would benefit because of this, since it was an ice type and could handle the ice, but Brock knew that Pikachu would suffer because of having an icy battlefield, because it wasn't used to the icy conditions. Sure enough, Pikachu tries to go after Regice with another quick attack, but it slips. So, Regice goes to use a Focus Punch on Pikachu, but before the Focus Punch can hit, Ash tells Pikachu to use a Thunderbolt, which actually was able to paralyze Regice, therefore stopping it from using another Focus Punch, as Max comments that Regice definitely felt that attack. Ash then tells Pikachu to follow up with an Iron Tail, which Max thought was a very good idea, since it was super effective. Brandon, however, didn't panic, even after Regice was hit by this Iron Tail, as he simply had Regice use Ice Beam. At first, Ash was fine with this, because the Ice Beam didn't hit Pikachu directly. However, Ash noticed Brandon's true plan, which was to actually freeze the stadium more, basically creating large ice pillars that extended off of the already frozen stadium, that trapped Pikachu in between them. With Pikachu unable to do jack shit, Brandon had Regice use a rest, with Oak clarifying that Regice would be fully healed after it rested, and be able to continue battling like nothing had happened so far, which made everyone else in the crowd worry. Since not only would Regice's health be restored, but it would be a cure from its paralysis too. Pikachu didn't want to stay trapped, but it didn't know how to free itself. Thankfully, Ash came up with an idea, telling Pikachu to use Iron Tail, which destroyed the ice pillars, capturing it, setting it free. In the process, though, the ice pillars that were broken started to fall all over Pikachu, so Pikachu used Quick Attack to dodge them, and also used Quick Attack to charge towards Regice right as it woke up. But before the Quick Attack could make contact, Brandon had Regice use Ice Beam, which scored a direct hit, freezing Pikachu solid. And, to boot, Regice was fucking fully healed and no longer paralyzed. And since Pikachu was frozen, it couldn't move for shit. Ash begged it to never give up, and reminded Pikachu that it always got the two of them out of a jam, because it was so fucking cool. But Pikachu was still having trouble doing anything because it was frozen, so when Ash begged it to use Thunderbolt, it couldn't. Since Pikachu was essentially immobile and unable to do jack shit, Samuel was about to declare Pikachu the loser and Brandon the winner, when suddenly sparks started to appear around Pikachu, and he managed to use the Thunderbolt to break free, shattering the ice and hitting Regice again, paralyzing it. Yeah, let's fucking go! Obviously, everyone in the crowd was utterly amazed by this shit, although Brandon refused to back down, telling Regice to use another Focus Punch, which hit Pikachu hard, sending it bouncing across the ice field, and all of the remaining ice pillars, shocking Ash at the fact that Regice was able to break free from the paralysis well enough. But Ash didn't panic, as he told Pikachu to bounce off of one of the pillars and use it as momentum to deliver an Iron Tail. So Pikachu did this, actually managing to get off 2 Iron Tails in a row, because it bounced off a second ice pillar too, doing major damage to Regice as a result. Brandon didn't give up though, as he told Regice to use Ice Beam again, and Pikachu tried to dodge, but it couldn't this time, and Pikachu was once again trapped in between a whole bunch of icy pillars. And now that Pikachu was immobile again, Brandon had Regice rest to regain its health and fully break free from its paralysis, worrying May, Max, Brock, and everyone else in the crowd. But Ash just did exactly what he did before, telling Ash to break free with an Iron Tail, which Pikachu did, breaking free from the ice pillars. exciting Max Man Rock as Pikachu then charged in with a strong Volt Tackle, wanting to take advantage of the fact that Regice was still resting and asleep, although Regice woke up and was fully recovered, allowing it to use an Ice Beam to try and stop Pikachu in his tracks and freeze him again. But thankfully, Pikachu was able to dodge, quelling Max's worries that Pikachu would be badly injured again and captured again. Once Pikachu had dodged, Pikachu was able to finish off, continuing on with its Volt Tackle, before Regice could launch another Ice Beam, even though Regice definitely wanted to, and as a result, Regice was knocked out by the Volt Tackle, meaning Ash was the winner. Samuel saw that Regice was knocked out and was crashed into a wall thanks to the Volt Tackle, and officially declared Regice unable to battle and Ash the winner, leaving Brandon surprised, while Ash, along with Pikachu, Scott, May, Max, Brock, Oak, Nurse Joy, Chansey, and Officer Jenny, all celebrated. Brandon then recalled his Regice and went up to Ash, congratulating Ash on his victory, and saying that he really fought with his own style, and that's what he needed to win, leading Ash to say that it was thanks to Brandon's advice that he was able to win. Brandon acknowledged this, but stated that someone being able to utilize advice given to them was just as important as the actual advice itself. So, as a reward for Ash beating him, Ash was presented with his final Battle Frontier symbol, the Brave symbol, making Ash immensely excited as he posed with Pikachu with his new symbol, since that meant he had officially collected every single Battle Frontier symbol there was. He had completed his Battle Frontier quest. Ash then bowed respectively to Brandon, and everyone went outside the Battle Pyramid, where Scott presented Ash with something that signified the fact that he had beaten all 7 Frontier Brains, a plaque with all 7 symbols on it. And Scott officially declared that, as the owner and founder of the Battle Frontier, he could officially declare that Ash was in the Hall of Fame of the Battle Frontier, since he had beaten every Frontier Brain. And Scott then offered Ash what he had promised him before, the chance to become a Frontier Brain. Although Ash actually declined, saying that being a Frontier Brain would limit him in what he could do on a journey. He would literally just be confined to a place for the most part. Sure, he could be like Brandon and go investigate ruins the odd time, but he would still have to come back to a specific spot. And he didn't want to do that, because there were still so many places he hadn't seen, and battles that he had yet to win, that were outside of the vicinity of the Battle Frontier, since a lot of people that were from Kanto probably wouldn't even do the Battle Frontier, and he wanted to battle people from all over the world. Scott was disappointed by what Ash said, but promised Ash that if he ever changed his mind, the offer would still be there. He could always be a Frontier Brain if he wanted to. At the end of the day, Scott respected Ash's decision, though. Brandon then declares that one day he and Ash would battle again. He would make sure that he always wanted to battle against new trainers, but for now, he and Samuel had to go in the Battle Pyramid to someplace else to go investigate. So, with that, Brandon and Samuel said goodbye to everyone else, hopped in the Battle Pyramid, and the Battle Pyramid took off on its jet-like things that essentially made it flyable. After this, everyone else departed. Scott, Nurse Joy, and Professor Oak got in Scott's car, with Bulbasaur coming with Oak. Scott was going to go wherever the wind took him to go look for people for the next Battle Frontier. But first, he was going to take Nurse Joy back to her Pokémon Center, and he was going to drive Professor Oak all the way back to his lab with Bulbasaur. So, Ash said goodbye to Bulbasaur, Oak, Nurse Joy, and Scott, and they drove off. Next, Officer Jenny took her leave with Squirtle, going back to the Squirtle Squad on their motorcycle, and Ash said goodbye to Squirtle. Lastly, Charizard left for the Charizard Valley, and Ash and the gang said goodbye to him. And Ash had promised to all of his Pokemon that just left that he would be sure to call upon them again. The episode then ends with Ash and the gang reflecting on their journey thus far. Ash had done it. He had beaten the Battle Frontier. Far cry from all his elite losses, huh? He actually won something. What was next for Ash and the gang? Find out next time on Pokemon Ball Z. We're actually getting very close to the end of the Hoenn Saga, guys. Well, I guess technically we've been out of the Hoenn Saga for a while because we've been in Kanto recently, but I still count it as part of the Hoenn Saga because it's basically just a continuation fully, but anyways, see you guys next episode.